Welcome to the first episode of the Hanratty on Karate podcast. This podcast will feature short conversations about karate techniques, training methods, and philosophy. I'm here with Sensei Hanratty in his home office in Calgary, Alberta. This first episode will be different from future episodes, with Sensei Hanratty discussing his upbringing and what drew him to karate. Now, before we talk about your early years, Sensei Hanratty, I see you have a lot of books on martial arts here, but also books on history, biography, philosophy, and other topics. Can you talk a bit about the role that books have played in your life?
Sure. Well, I've always been able to read. I can never remember not being able to read. In fact, I think I was picked out by my teachers in elementary school, what we called infant school in England, because I could read at a very early age. I'm not sure if I was self-taught or somebody just happened to take a little time with me and teach me how to read. A lot of the books, as you say, are martial arts. Some of them are quite rare. Some of them are signed editions. Well, a lot of them are signed editions. I've been lucky enough to train with most of the Japanese masters and a lot of European great masters over the years. So if I had a book that they wrote, or if there was a book about them, I managed to get it signed.
Is there one that stands out to you that had a lot of influence on you in terms of martial arts?
A martial arts book? Probably one of the first martial arts books, unfortunately, went missing. I lent it to somebody, which is the bane of all, but everybody who collects books, was a Kase Sensei kata book. It was written in French because Kase was one of the masters who took up residence in France. When the first group of Shotokan instructors came from Japan, from Nishiyama's instructors course, they came to Europe. Initially in Liverpool, we had Kanazawa and Noida. Then Noida stayed with the KUGB. Kanazawa formed his own group. But out of that first group of instructors, Sensei Shirai went to Italy, Sensei Kase went to France, Oishi went to Germany. So they spread around. It was a really good marketing technique on the part of the JKA, getting the instructors out all over the world and spreading the art. It was actually a good stroke by Nakayama.
And you said that you can't ever remember not reading. So what do you think was driving that, and how did it change you?
I think I just had a thirst for knowledge. I was always extremely inquisitive. I tended to question everything, which got me into a lot of trouble. I was a war orphan, and so I grew up in social homes with occasional bursts or little stays in grandparents, but not for long. They were overflowing with unwanted kids. And anyway, my little inquisitive nature and the fact that I tended to question stuff, especially the dogma in the Catholic Church at that time, which ran most of the social homes, this got me into a fair bit of trouble, but didn't stop me questioning it. It just made me think why they didn't want to answer.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to ask you more about your upbringing in a moment, but before I do, just want to paint the picture a bit of your office here. I see you have belts hanging up, you have some samurai swords, you have a Buddha statue, and some photos from your training and others in the past.
Right.
Can you describe some of what we see here?
Well, I hung up my belts as they get too worn to wear. So there's three. There's probably a couple got lost, but they're my three favorites. I also have a belt that was given to me by Toru Yamaguchi's top student, Toru Warai. He was Kohai to Yamaguchi, and he was kind enough to give me his belt in the 80s when we trained together. The swords were a gift, all three of them. There's a couple of daikatanas and a wakizashi. I have a couple of tantos as well knocking around somewhere. The Buddha, I just happen to like the Buddhist. It's not a religion. I don't think Buddhism is a religion. I think it's more a way of life for people, but it's the most peaceful that I can see amongst the religions, which are not worth talking about if you're talking about harmony. And I have a whole bunch of samurai figurines that I've collected over the years or been given. there's a whole bunch more downstairs as well.
Mm.
Yeah, some pictures, a portrait that was painted by a friend of mine in Australia, who's a really good portrait painter. And as you say, a lot of pictures of early training and some pencil line drawings of myself competing, and some old pictures of Liverpool, my hometown.
Now, as you mentioned, yeah, you grew up in Liverpool, and for those who haven't read your book yet, which
Yeah.
is of course Hanratty on Karate, Training the Body and Mind, which is available soon. It'll be available as an audiobook as well. Talk a little bit more, please, about what it was like. It was in the post-war years that you grew up.
Yeah, I was born in 1945, just about VE Day. My dad was a merchant seaman, and my mother lived down in the Dingle in Liverpool. It was wartime, so I think they just got together, spur of the moment, instantly regretted it, but social-cultural pressures of the time forced them to marry. I don't think they were suited for it or ready for it, but that's the way it was at the time. My father went back to sea, and when I was born, he was actually, I found out, in Australia in prison. He was there for 3 or 4 years after that. My mother took up with a soldier who already had a family. Unfortunately, his wife died during the war in the Blitz, but he had 2 older daughters, so he didn't really want another child, especially somebody else's. So I was just dropped, so I was kind of abandoned. Now, most of this I picked up over the years, and especially since my wife Julie, she got very inquisitive about it. And so we dug up a load of websites and things like that. So I got to know the family tree. Wasn't very impressed with it, to be honest with you. But you are what you are. You are what you choose to be, right? Your choices are what makes you what you are. And so, as I say, I grew up partly in my mother's mother, so my grandmother, but not for long because she had a family full of unwanted kids from her other daughters and sons who weren't exactly nice people. A couple of them were in jail, a couple of them were, doing the night profession. So I wasn't really welcome there. You were just kind of put up with. So social homes and foster homes was what I remember. Different schools, changing schools a lot. And what I did want was I really wanted an education. And that's what drove me to reading as much as I do. And as you say, there's a whole mixture of books. There's philosophy and engineering books. So that's where I ended up in engineering. But there's also some really good literature, everything. I concentrated over the last few years on Russian literature. So there's a lot of Solzhenitsyn and Dostoevsky, Tom Tolstoy. I kind of got interested in the whole Russian thing around the turn of the century, and surprisingly enough, how the revolution didn't so much change them; it just changed who was in charge. It was a different time, and then the philosophy. Some of the philosophical books go back quite a way. These books here by Will Durant, they're quite old, but he has some interesting stuff in there. Then I have some modern philosophers like Yuval Harari.
Yeah.
Mostly I lean towards Stoicism in my philosophical outlook. It tends to suit me, and I think it's probably the nicest way without screwing anybody up. A lot of the other philosophical ideas that you get, say, from Kant, Nietzsche, Freud, they can mess with your head. You tend to go too deep in them, and you're looking to blame everybody else on your existence.
Obviously, your outlook has evolved over time, and it's been shaped by these books. What was your outlook like when you were still a youngster? You describe in your book this the competitive nature and how this
Yeah.
you felt like you had to step sometimes on others, or they would step on you.
Yeah.
You had to step on them first. Can you talk a bit more about what your mindset and temperament was like when you were younger?
Yeah, my temperament wouldn't be looked upon as social right now in these days. I was probably angry without knowing about it. I never felt deprived because I don't think children do. children are like dogs, you know. You lock them in a car for 3 hours, they're just happy to see you when they get out. Kids will always make their own happiness. You see little kids running around in Africa kicking a bunch of plastic bags around for a ball and they're happy as Larry. It's only when it's pointed out to you that you may have been deprived or you may have been pushed down the social scale. Then what you decide to do is you either accept it or you can resent it. A lot of people resented it and then go against authority and turn into the criminal side of it and then use that as an excuse. I didn't do that, but I came pretty close a couple of times. I tended to put my anger out on other people who I felt were too accepting, or they had this inverse snobbery, if you like. Inverse snobbery is like, you can get people who love royalty and all that, and they're just snobs. They think they're better off because of their association with somebody. It's still prevalent today, even in karate. Some people think they're good just because they're associated with somebody. The glory by association's never been my thing. And then you get the other side of the coin with people who are dirt poor, ignorant as hell, and they're quite proud of it. This is our background, this is our culture, and we're proud of it. And it's kind of like, well, it's like the Trump people, right? Right now, you have situations in the southern states where they're probably least educated, least looked after as far as welfare, dirt poor, least amount of money, and yet they're quite proud of the fact that they support this idiot who's taking all the money off them. It's the same thing as people who give money to TV evangelists. Yeah.
I think you've painted the picture very well of this childhood environment, but then you started getting into boxing at quite a young age, right?
Yeah. I went to a school in the Dingle called St. Malachy's, and I went for the first couple of years there because I was in and out of foster homes or stayed the odd weekend with my grandmother, Mrs. Leonard. And St. Malachy's had a boxing club. Now, you couldn't box, but you used to follow the other kids in after school because nobody went home. You played out all day and you went home when it was dark. Didn't matter what the weather was. So if you could find somewhere to go, you did. And of course, you got to hang around with other kids, sometimes bigger kids, which little kids always like to do. And so you watched them in the boxing ring, and they had a boxing club in St. Malachy's in the basement with old leather bags, big heavy bags and gloves. And you weren't allowed in the ring, you weren't allowed to spar, but you could punch the bags and do a little bit of skip rope and stuff like that.
The age you're at when you first tried that out?
Probably 7, 8. You started to fight at age 10. You got into the schools teams. And I didn't do too bad in the schools teams, but even though I changed schools a few times between probably 8 and 15, I changed schools a lot. I always managed to find a boxing club in a school. If I didn't, I'd go to a Protestant school, which was really frowned upon, and I'd train with them. In fact, I fought the Liverpool Championship for Harrison Jones Boxing Club, which was a Protestant school, and I was actually attending a Catholic school called Sacred Heart. Not that I wanted to attend a Catholic school, I didn't get a say in it,
Yeah.
That's where you were sent.
Right. And now, so if we fast forward a bit, you spent time working on the pilot boats outside of Liverpool, and then you were in the merchant marine, traveled the world. Then in your mid-20s, talk about your first exposure to karate, what the club was like.
Yeah. It was in Liverpool, and I've always been fit. I'd been all around the world before I was 18, sailed all around the world, out through Panama, back through Suez, hundreds of different ports. And I wasn't getting an education. I was reading everything I could lay my hands on, but there was no future in it, and I could kind of see that coming up. And so I decided I needed to get an education. And the best way I had of doing that was looking at it as, for me at that time, was to join the military. The military would upgrade me to GCE level, which I didn't get to in school, which is general certificate, if you like.
Yeah, high school diploma level, approximately.
Yeah. And then also, if you wanted to, you could also go into night classes or supplementary courses. and go up to A levels, which was, university entrance level. And so I managed to do that in the army. So when I left the army, what I did in the army is I took also selection courses for SAS, which was recruiting throughout the army. They only recruit from within inside the forces. I took the selection, but if I had passed, they wanted me to sign on for another 9 years, and I didn't feel like giving the army another 9 years. The army, to me, was just the same as foster homes or the Catholic school system. You didn't have to be clever to get on in the army. You just said yes, sir, at the right time, or you spent enough time there that they promoted you. It certainly wasn't, at that time anyway, it certainly wasn't by being the best. No, there was definitely a lack of merit, a lack of common sense. So when I came out of the army, I went to university, and I was staying in a flat in Liverpool. I'd come back to Liverpool, actually, would have been about 65, 66. And went to university and had a lot of spare time. So in my spare time, I worked as a mechanic as well. And then I started getting much more money as a mechanic. So unfortunately, I didn't finish my grad work, and I left. So it would have been about, I was working for the Territorial Army, which is kind of like the National Guard here. So the Army got me that job, and I was working as a mechanic for them. And I was doing quite well. And we started a skydiving school, and we used to go up to the Lake District. We'd do rock climbing, we'd do hiking. I was just really fit. And I went back boxing, but I quickly realized I was never going to make it as a professional or anything else. And I didn't want my brains beat out by the time I was 30 anyway. So down the road from the boxing club was the Red Triangle Karate Club. But I didn't start there. I went and had a look, and I liked it. It was regimented and everything else. And the discipline, I don't know, it was pretty mysterious at that time. There was a lot of mystery surrounding. There's this secret, deadly martial art kind of thing. Anyway, a friend of mine said he was going to a karate club in Prescott, which is just outside Liverpool. And he asked me if I wanted to go. So I went up there, and the guy's name was Frank Vernon. He was one of the founder members of the Karate Union of Great Britain. His instructor was from the Triangle. Well, not his instructor, his compatriot. He was the same grade as the people in the Triangle. But the instructor that they brought in was Kenosuke Onoida, who was just amazing. Like, you saw this guy and you went, whoa, I want to be like that. Or I'm going to try and be like that. You couldn't never be the same.
There's a great line in your book. You say that he was on fire with karate.
Oh, yeah, he was. He just set everybody else on fire. And the man just had so much presence and charisma. When he walked into the dojo, everybody just looked. You knew, oh, this is the real deal. So at that time, I'd managed to secure a black taxi cab from one of the old guys I used to do maintenance on his cab. And he decided to retire and asked me if I wanted to buy it. Now, it wasn't so much the cab that was worth the money, it was the license plate on the back, because there was only so many of them issued. And so I bought the cab off him, paid her out in installments, and then I slowly built up till I got 4 or 5 cabs. And so what I do is I drive the cab at night when my drivers had a night off. And believe it or not, in Liverpool, you'd get into a fight every night with furs or just people being jerks, because Liverpool is one tough city. I have yet to come across a city that's as tough as Liverpool, and I've lived in a few different places. Even when I was at sea or in the army, there's just places you go to in Liverpool, the hair on the back of your neck is up and you're constantly aware. You know where you are, you're really aware of your spatial surroundings, and that's just the way it is. You could find a fight every night of the week if you wanted. So anyway, Frank's club closed down. He was in the Prescott Community Centre, and he said to me, you should just go down the Triangle and train there. So I did, and I spent the next 4 or 5 years down at the Triangle. I was rubbish. I really was. Wasn't flexible. All I had was spirit. I had a ton of spirit. And I think the instructors at that time, that's what they were looking for. Like you had some naturals who were very, very good, like Bob Poynton and Terry O'Neill. When I say naturals, like their body lent themselves to the training they were doing. Nobody was a natural in that it came easy. Everybody worked for what they got or what they did. Like Terry O'Neill worked all the time to get as good as he was. So did Bob Poynton. So did Billy Crystal, Frank Brennan. All of these guys, they just worked. So that attracted me. I love the dedication, and I went into it with the same attitude as they did, sometimes even more if I could, get it. I'd try to outlast them on the floor. I could probably do it for stamina and sheer spirit, maybe not for technique. I was a little bit older than them, a couple of years difference. So that's how I got into it. Now, as I say, it wasn't natural. I never passed a grading first time. I didn't even know what a grading was. I didn't have any goal. All I wanted to do was get a bit better. There was
That
no,
never
there was no
discouraged
goal.
you when you didn't pass those gradings at the first try?
No, because it's like I say to the people I'm grading now, if you pass this grade, you're not going to be any better than you were 3 hours ago or yesterday, right? And if you fail, you're not going to be any worse. So it doesn't really mean anything, right? And grading is definitely a Western concept. And I read enough about karate at that time to know that it was a Western concept. And it's not the way karate was originally taught. In Okinawa, it wasn't even called karate, it was called Tode, right? And Funakoshi brought in the word karate, and even he changed the kanji to mean empty hand instead of China's hand. But it's the same character, just a different meaning. Just to suit the Japanese. It wasn't at all. You have to remember, karate is only a little over a century old, the way that we know it. Although the roots go back a long way. The way that it's taught now, to be honest with you, a lot of it, the way it's taught now is garbage. It's absolute garbage. They split it up into sport karate and traditional karate, so-called traditional karate, and then Okinawan karate, which they say, there's no styles. But of course there's styles, right? Right from the start, I found out that the different districts in Okinawa had their own style, like Nahate from Naha City and Shurite from Shuri City. So these were different styles or different methods of employing or doing the techniques. The difference with the Western one is Westerners tend to be very goal-orientated, and they look on any kind of criticism or lack of a goal as a failing. I never felt I'd failed because I'd got to the point where I could grade. And so that was, to me, that was a success. I was okay with it. I thought I was as good as the people who passed.
Would it have surprised you at that time if someone told you that 50 some years later you would have spent a whole lifetime doing karate?
No, at that time somebody said I'd still be alive at this stage, I would have laughed. I honestly didn't think I'd live to the age I am. Even, maybe 30 years, I thought I would be gone. I lived a hard life, right? But I did everything I wanted to do. And most of the choices I made in my life, I haven't regretted them. There's a few, everybody has a few. It's like, you have three faces. You have the choices that you talk to people about, the things that you've done that you regret, but you'll still talk about them. And then there's the things that you're never going to talk to anybody about. It's like the three faces of man. One you show to your friends, one you show to your closer family, and one you keep to yourself.
Right. Now you've raised so many points and so many topics that can be expanded on in future episodes.
Sure.
Maybe we could just wrap up with just a couple of thoughts on what karate has provided to you these 50 some years after you first started.
It's given me a lot of satisfaction, not in the fact that I was able to do the techniques that I was doing. I think what's given me the most satisfaction is that I watched how people learn. I watched how I learned and the people around me, how they learned when I was first starting. It's like every beginner. I know every beginner, they're not going to be looking at the instructor. They're going to be looking at the person next to him. Like, this is what they do. And the person next to you shows you a lot. He actually shows the instructor a lot as well. And over the years, I got to feed off that, and I got to figure out the best way to teach people and how to bring out the best in them. And I honestly feel like the best thing I ever did was figuring out how to teach karate and share what I felt for it with other people. And it doesn't happen with everybody. You get a lot of disappointments. I still get a little twinge if somebody leaves, right? Especially if they've been with me, any length of time. But at the same time, I've got people who have been with me 30, 40 years. So I'm quite happy about that. And they're still there. And the fact that they're still there, they're still learning, and they still turn to me for a little bit of explanation or, do you know this? And what surprises me, and I would say this about anybody who's been in martial arts for 30, 40 years or 50 years like myself, you will be surprised at how much you know, how much you've soaked up over the years. You surprise yourself. So when I was writing the books, the handbook and the other book, it wasn't what to put in that book that perplexed me. What I regretted was not being able to put enough in it, right? Because there's so much more to it, but you can only scrape the surface. And I barely scraped the surface with that last book. And people have said, oh, well, you should do more and more and more. But I don't want it to be a personal thing. I would rather that you go and find out and, go on your own journey. I mean, I'll help you and I'll show you the way because I've been down this road. And basically that's what I do. I just say, look, I've been down this road, so I'm going to show you the way, right? We're going this way. This is the way to do it. Don't go over there. Don't go over there. You'll get lost.
Well, thank you. That's about the time we have for this first episode. So Sensei Hanratty's books, one of them is the Shotokan Instructor's Handbook, and the most recent one is Hanratty on Karate, Training the Body and Mind. Please join us in future episodes for us to expand on karate techniques, karate philosophy, and training methods.
And if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer. And if I don't know the answer, I will find out for you. That's what a good instructor does.
Thank you for listening, and please join us for future episodes.